exposed. The sinister secrets of a cursed prison, hidden in the Nevada desert with terrifying rules. The moon hung low over Desert Hollow Prison, a monstrous silhouette against the sharp desert sky. It seemed to breathe, its crumbling walls whispering secrets of despair. Lisa's heart raced as she parked outside, the shadows pushing against her like a malevolent hand. "What am I doing?" she muttered, clutching her steering wheel. This job was supposed to be a new beginning. She had to support her kids after Mark left, but already the tension knotted in her stomach like a thick rope. Inside the prison, darkness coiled like a serpent, waiting to strike. Echoes ricocheted off the peeling paint as she stepped into the hallways. Flickering lights turned the dimness into a strobe chasing memories of forgotten screams. She shivered as laughter echoed hollowly down the corridors, almost as if the past had been resurrected from the dead. Every step felt like a dare. The oppressive air was thick with dread, and suddenly the tales she'd heard, stories of madness and curses, flooded her mind. Had she made a grave mistake taking this job? Subtle tremors of fear coursed through her when she discovered the notes hidden in the cells. Words scrawled in hurried handwriting cried out warnings and confessions that chilled her blood. "Stay away after midnight," one advised, ink spattered like dark tears. Another hinted at unspeakable rituals. What kind of place was this? She tried to breathe through the anxiety, focusing instead on the clock ticking toward midnight, reminding her that Ellie and Jake were at home, waiting for her. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the minutes dragged on, a sudden burst of frantic alarms shattered the silence. Lights flickered like frantic fireflies, and Lisa's nerves shot up. Shadows moved in her peripheral vision, dancing just out of reach. She could feel her heart pounding loudly in her chest. That's when she noticed the drawing symbols etched into the walls. Not just graffiti, but something darker. It made her skin crawl. Her pulse quickened, the horror of a truth she had dismissed tucking itself into her mind like a knife. And then, an unexpected knock echoed from behind her. The sheriff, a man she once trusted, stood there with a grim expression. As he casually inspected the security protocols, his presence felt entirely too invasive. Every instinct screamed that he wasn't here to help. "You know about all the accidents," he said, his tone almost playful. He lingered near the back door, making her spine tingle with unease. As the clock ticked toward midnight, the atmosphere thickened. Lisa sensed eyes watching her. Fear wrapped itself around her like a cold blanket. She was trapped in an endless night, and everything she had feared loomed closer than she could comprehend. A blood-curdling scream erupted from deep within the bowels of the prison, shattering whatever remaining composure she had left. It solidified her gut-wrenching dread. There was something else here, something that should not be, something that wanted out. And with the flicker of the lights, she felt an unknown power pulling her toward a hidden section of the floor, a secret waiting to be uncovered. The clock was ticking. Would it be too late for her to escape this living nightmare before it claimed her too? The darkness thickened, swallowing Lisa whole as she hesitated at the threshold of the hidden corridor. Every instinct told her to turn back, yet an invisible force tugged insistently at her conscience. The flickering lights faded, leaving her in an oppressive blackness. She could hear the distant echoes of her own racing heart, combating the unsettling silence. "Don't do this," she whispered, her own voice sounding foreign in the emptiness. Just when she thought she could convince herself to leave, the air shifted. A whisper, barely audible, brushed against her ear. "Help me." Chills raced down her spine. Who was asking for help? With a shaky breath, she stepped into the corridor, the rough concrete cool beneath her fingertips as her palms pressed against the wall for guidance. Goosebumps prickled her skin as the atmosphere shifted, charged with a malevolence that threatened to envelop her. The corridor stretched ahead, its end shrouded in a darkness even less inviting than the rest of the prison. Shadows seemed to pulse, breathing with a mind of their own. A murmur from farther down sent a jolt of fear through her. It wasn't just her imagination. There was something there, impossibly drawn. Lisa took one hesitant step after another, her footfalls echoing ominously. The faint sound of scratching reached her ears, rhythmic and deliberate. Panic rose, but she pressed on, the urge to discover the source magnifying her curiosity and terror in equal measure. In an alcove crowded with dust and debris, she spotted the remnants of an old metal door, ajar and rusted. A sudden draft wafted through, carrying the scent of decay with it. The inscriptions outside, some drawn with those frantic hands, others carved deep, intensified her dread as she neared the door. Another scream erupted from deep within the bowels of the prison, this one raw and filled with despair. A frenzied urgency propelled her forward, but instinct screamed for her to retreat. However, she couldn't turn back. Not now. She needed to know what awaited on the other side, what horror had been awakened once more. She forced herself to push the door open. A small, cramped room revealed itself, the heavy air thick with something bitterly sweet, almost suffocating. Shadows twisted through the corners, forming shapes that seemed to leer at her. And there it was, the source of the scratching. A figure curled in the corner, wild hair matted, eyes wide and unseeing. "Help me," the figure croaked, voice jagged like glass. Lisa recoiled, terror coursing through her veins. Who was this person? What had happened to them? And why did the voice feel hauntingly familiar? Suddenly, the flickering lights snapped back on, illuminating the room in stark clarity. The prisoner looked at her with wide, desperate eyes, and Lisa froze, a chill coursing through her as she recognized the face, contorted with agony. "What have they done to you?" Lisa gasped, stepping back as confusion and fear collided. A loud clang reverberated from the main hall, breaking through her panic. The sheriff's voice echoed through the corridor, calling out her name in a tone that was both calm and menacing. "Lisa, where are you? You shouldn't wander off, it's dangerous." Her mind raced, a suffocating fog closing in as she struggled to understand. What danger lay ahead? And would she be able to escape the prison's grasp? Or was she destined to join the tortured souls trapped within its walls? As her heart pounded, she turned back to the figure, desperate for answers. But the room seemed to pulse with an oppressive dark energy, and just like that, the figure was gone, a mere whisper of despair remaining in its wake. Panic surged, knowing she might not be alone for long. Lisa had to move. She had to find a way out before the shadows descended again. But where could she go? And would anyone believe the horrors that lurked within Desert Hollow Prison? Lisa's breath came in quick, shallow gasps as she stepped back from the empty corner. The walls seemed to close in, the air thickening, turning stifling. "No," she uttered softly, the weight of despair folding over her like a damp cloth. Where had the figure gone? Moments before, she could have sworn she felt their despair pulsing like a heartbeat. Get out, a thought crawled through her mind, as revulsion gripped her stomach. She spun to leave, casting one last frantic glance around the room that felt like it pulsated with unseen eyes. Shadows shifted, elongating, twisting toward her retreat. "Lisa!" The sheriff's voice echoed closer now, reverberating off the corridor walls. "Get back here." She stumbled toward the exit, her palms sweating against the cool steel of the door frame. A frenzied rush of adrenaline propelled her forward, but with every step, another echo seemed to block her path. It was as if the shadows held her captive, their icy fingers threading around her ankles, attempting to pull her down. But she had to escape. Lisa pushed through the door and into the main hallway, where light flickered like a dying star overhead. The oppressive environment felt alive, dripping with unspoken horrors. She needed clarity, a plan. Each footfall carried an urgency that was palpable. The hair on her arms stood on end as she turned to a fleeting memory, the face of the figure. "Who are you?" she mumbled, half hoping for an answer that would never come. All that remained was the haunting echo of a whisper, "Help me," swirling in her mind. Then came the shuffling noise, again and again, mingled with the distant clanking of metal. Fear surged. Who, or what, lurked in the shadows? Captives? Monsters? Lisa couldn't tell and didn't want to find out. Suddenly, the sheriff appeared at the far end of the corridor, his figure stark against the flickering lights. "Hurry!" he shouted, his urgency pulling her close. Relief washed over her at his presence, but it was instantly chased away by the strangeness in his tone. Was it fear, or something darker? As she dashed toward him, the lights blinked violently, casting eerie shadows. In a heartbeat, his figure shifted. One moment he was in front of her. The next, he was gone. The lights stuttered, plunging the corridor into darkness once more. Lisa halted, scanning her surroundings. "Sheriff?" Panic laced her voice. Every instinct screamed for her to bolt, but she stood paralyzed. A sense of dread crept like icy fingers up her spine, and the sense of an unseen presence materialized behind her. "Help me!" The voice rang out again, this time softer, closer. "Stop it!" she yelled, yet the echo twisted her own words into mockery. She fumbled for her phone, fingers trembling as she smashed the power button, praying for light, for a signal, for any form of escape. Instead, her screen flickered. An old photograph illuminated her face, revealing a figure standing crookedly, muffled screams trapped behind the glass. Lisa's breath seized. Looking closer, horror crashed into her as she recognized the worn photograph. It was the figure from the corner, their eyes captured in anguish, their lips forming the same cry that haunted her dreams. "Get out!" The urgency drove her into motion again, heart racing, crashing against her ribs. She spun and ran down the hallway, drawing closer, she thought, to the entrance. But the shadows writhed, a living wave crashing, pulling her back into their labyrinthine grasp. A door loomed ahead, marked with a single word: exit. Relief surged through her if she could reach it at the last moment. Her foot struck the floor hard, sending her sprawling. The darkness twisted and whispered. It's too late. In that instant, the lights flickered back on, illuminating the hellish scene, objects moving, shadows laughing, and something staring right at her with cold, dead eyes. "Get out!" Lisa's heart thundered as she scrambled to her feet, ready to race toward the exit. But who or what had called out? Before she could process another thought, laughter filled the air, sharp and sinister, and the shadows around her began to close in. "Help me!" And there it was again, the chant echoing. A chant that didn't belong to the shadows but to something far worse. She had entered a game of survival without understanding its cruel rules, and now she wasn't sure who was playing anymore. What awaited behind that door? What lay in wait in the corrupt corridors of Desert Hollow Prison as they hunted for their next victim? The shadows shuddered around her like restless spirits. Lisa's heart raced, each rapid beat echoing in her ears, drowning out her own thoughts. She was paralyzed, feeling the weight of the darkness press in on all sides, cloaked figures and whispers swirling around her like a storm. They weren't just shadows. They were memories, fragments of suffering, lonely cries locked in this forsaken prison. "Get out!" The voice boomed again, this time echoing through the hall with a chilling resonance. Was it the sheriff? Was it something else? With sheer will, Lisa tore her gaze from the shadows and stumbled toward the exit. Her legs felt heavy, each step sinking into the ground, as if the prison was trying to swallow her whole. But desperation fueled her. She had to escape. As she reached for the door, the handle felt oddly warm, pulsating. She hesitated. A sickening dread washed over her. What lay behind that door? Would it lead to freedom or something far worse? "Help me!" The voice cracked, drawing her attention to the flickering light above. It cast an illusion, bright and inviting yet filled with malice. The whispers spiraled again, merging into a cacophony that swirled around her head, pulling her into their depths. Images blurred before her eyes, faces twisted in anguish, mouths agape in silent screams. "Lisa!" It was the sheriff's voice again, this time urgent, desperate. "You need to move." But where was he? She couldn't see him. All that surrounded her was chaos, and the shadows were closing in. "Run!" Something in her bones screamed at her to flee, to shove her way through, confront whatever lurked in the darkness. She didn't know what would happen next, but standing still felt like a death sentence. Panic surged again as she flung the door open, barreling through into the adjoining room. It was a small, dimly lit space, barely furnished, the air thick with an acrid stench of decay and something else fear. A cold shiver crawled up her spine. The room was eerily still, and a single flickering bulb swung above her, casting fingers of light that barely touched the corners. She could barely make out the remnants of old, stained furniture, rusting chains hanging from the wall, a tattered mattress in one corner, as if it had been abandoned mid-nightmare. That way, another voice called, echoing through the vastness of the room. Panic flooded her as she turned. The darkness shifted, revealing a figure crouched in the corner. A woman, ragged and wild-eyed. For a moment, desperation flickered in her gaze, piercing through the layers of despair. "Help me," the woman gasped, reaching out, her fingers almost touching Lisa's before the shadows enveloped her again. "No," Lisa shouted instinctively. "Stay away." It was a pitiful cry drowned by the laughter that cascaded through the room, mocking her plea. All around her, shadows shifted violently, transforming into grotesque shapes. Whispers turned into frenzied screams, climbing over themselves to be heard. "You can't escape. Join us." Lisa backed away, her breath coming in ragged bursts. She needed a way out. The sickening pull of the darkness urged her to cower, but she couldn't stop now. The feeling of dread in her gut morphed into fury. "Get away from me." She surged toward the other side of the room, feeling the walls constrict like a vice. Flickering shadows leaped to life, menacing in their charge. She was running out of time. Decisions needed to be made fast, and a final desperate act. Lisa rushed toward a window, hoping beyond hope it wasn't barred. The glass was filthy. Smeared with grime and old blood, she recoiled momentarily. But the clanking of chains, the shouts, and the laughter drew closer. With strength she didn't know she had, she lunged for the window, smashing her palm against the cold glass. "Let me out." Suddenly, a shriek pierced her vision. A face emerging, eyes wide, mouth agape. The visage of pure terror that mirrored her own. And with that, the sound cut off abruptly. Lisa jerked her head back. Was it the figure again? Who had just shared her last moments? The shadows loomed, pulling the light away, wrapping around her like a thick fog. Lisa's pulse raced. Dread coiled tight inside her. The sins of this place writhed just beneath the surface, ready to swallow her whole if she didn't act fast. And then she felt it, the cold embrace of the shadows behind her. "Help me" echoed through the room again. Did I end that moment? One question clawed at her mind. How many souls had been trapped in this nightmarish abyss? What deeper horrors awaited as the whispers grew louder, demanding her attention? Would she risk everything to find out? The glass shattered under her palm, scattering shards that glimmered like teeth in the dim light. Lisa stumbled backwards, heart thudding, the jagged edges reflecting the terror in her eyes. Blood seeped from her hand, but she barely noticed. All she could feel was the harrowing pressure closing in from every side, the darkness yawning like an insatiable beast. "Get out! Get out!" The voice roared again, closer now, echoing off the walls with raw urgency. Was it the sheriff? Or was it simply another illusion trying to deter her? She had no choice. The darkness throbbed, pulsing with grotesque life, an unseen force pressing her to remain. Somewhere in the chaos, the voice of the sheriff whispered, "Trust me. Trust." She'd been clinging to that word, but it felt like sand slipping through her fingers. With a fierce determination, Lisa turned and faced the flickering light overhead. It was her only guide in this abyss. The shadows seemed to sway to their own rhythm as she pushed through the clutter of remnants, stumbling back toward the entrance of the room. Every part of her body sang out in protest, exhausted and trembling, but she couldn't stop. Then she saw it, a darkened doorway near the far wall. It loomed like a gaping mouth, an invitation mixed with a warning. Was it another trap? A heartbeat of hesitation thrummed within her. If she didn't move now, the shadows would consume her whole. "Help me!" The woman's voice pressed into her conscience again, but the sinister note behind it sent chills down her spine. "No!" Lisa screamed, willing herself to ignore the guilt that bubbled within. She took a deep breath, summoning all the courage she had left, and sprinted toward the doorway as she reached it. The shadows lunged, crystalline fingers grasping at her limbs. She could feel their icy touch, the biting cold that threatened to drag her down into their entangled horror. Fighting against instinct, she ducked into the opening, pushing her way through what felt like dense fog. This time, the air was thick with a different texture, a mix of burnt rubber and desperation. She paused only for a moment to glance back, and what she saw brought her to the brink of terror. The shadows twisted into grotesque forms, merging into a chaotic wail that clawed at her ears. The cries were overwhelming, rising like an anguished symphony. There were hands reaching out now, not just whispers and illusions. Real hands, ghostly pale, with skin hanging loose, clawing for her. "Join us. You belong here," they shrieked in eerie harmony. "No," Lisa shouted, the word tasting like ashes on her tongue. With desperate strides, she fled further into the unknown. Every step was a battle against the gnawing horrors behind her, as the shouts transformed into sorrowful chants weaving in and out of her consciousness, blurring the line between suffering and relief. Ahead, she saw light wash over her path, an otherworldly brightness that made her eyes sting. It was a doorway, cracked open just enough to let a trickle of hope escape. Her body barely felt like her own as she pushed through the cold air, adrenaline escorting her toward that beam of light, guiding her with the promise of escape. As she neared, she could see figures beyond the door, shadows dancing like marionettes under the glow. "Help," a voice whispered, but it was no longer pleading. It was an invitation, wrapped in seduction. Lisa faltered. "Anyone," she shouted, desperate. "Anyone, help me." But as she crossed the threshold, an inexplicable weight pressed upon her soul, dragging her back. The shadows along the wall contorted, reaching, grabbing, clamoring to claim her. She gasped, her breath hitching in her throat. The faces that loomed in the light were ghastly, twisted in expressions of delight mixed with despair, eyes glimmering with a maddening allure. "Stay with us, Lisa," they beckoned, voices sweet yet laced with poison. With one last surge of will, she turned to the shadows behind, realizing they held no chains as she had feared. They were merely parodies of those who had come before. Rushing back, she could feel their power wane, their grasp loosening as she tore her heart from their grasp. But now something shifted. The door behind her slammed shut, sealing her fate within. Shadows pressed against her skin, their whispers becoming thunderous echoes. Welcome home. What lay ahead was the fading shimmer of hope, a twisted choice between fear and surrender. Would she find a way to escape this prison of horror, or had the darkness claimed another victim? As she stood there, caught between worlds, she realized one heart-wrenching truth. The prison didn't just hold the lost, it fed off their despair. How many more would come, and how many would be consumed? And just then, a new shadow emerged, one she didn't recognize. What did it want? The answer loomed on the horizon, jagged and dark, eager to unveil its secrets. The air crackled around Lisa, humming with an energy that prickled against her skin. She stood in that newly sealed chamber, the weight of the shadows pressing against her as if they were alive, breathing steadily. The gaunt faces turned to her, their eyes swirling with a mixture of torment and dark yearning. Time stretched, taut and agonizing. "Who are you?" Lisa demanded, her voice cutting through the thick tension, though it quivered like a string ready to snap. They didn't respond, only continued to stare, their mouths curling into sickening smiles, teeth glinting in the dim light. She could sense their hunger, their desire to draw her into the abyss they inhabited. They were like moths to a flame, and she was the bait. Desperation fed her resolve. "What do you want from me?" she pressed, her heart pounding like a drum, each beat a reminder of her fragility. A figure stepped forward from the throng. He was taller, with skin that dripped grease like melted wax. His shadow clung to the brick wall like a petulant child. "You have something we need," he crooned, his voice oily and smooth. "It's in you, your pain, your fear. It will sustain us." Lisa staggered back, the implication crashing down on her. "I'm not giving you anything," she shouted, anger pushing against the cold fear threatening to engulf her. A low rumble of laughter rippled through the shadows. "That is where you're wrong," he said, eyes glimmering with malice. "We already possess you, dear Lisa. You're caught in our web." Accept it. An overwhelming sensation surged through her, fear tangled with despair, liquid and hot. She could feel the pull of their despair claw at her heart, squeezing tighter. With every second, she could feel her essence siphoning, the warmth dimming within her. "No!" she yelled, palms pressed against her temples as if willing the darkness to recede. But it continued to seep in, drowning her will. In a frantic attempt to push back, she looked around. The walls rung with whispers, disjointed murmurs of those who had been consumed before her. "Lisa," they sighed, their voices soaked in anguish. Then she saw it. The wall on her right was marred with something strange, patterns twisting and writhing. A handprint? No, 1,000 handprints, pressed hard against the surface as if someone had been waging war to escape this very place. The realization hit her like ice water. Others had fought. Others had failed. "We will be free," the twisted figure spoke again, this time closer. His breath, a frigid gust, sent shudders down her spine. "Will you join us, Lisa? Will you help us complete our liberation?" Each word wrapped around her like vine tendrils, squeezing tight. Amid the darkness, she could see flickers of hope rise, memories of life outside the prison. The warmth of the sun, laughter, the sweet taste of freedom. "No," she gasped, summoning every ounce of strength she had left. "I won TB food for your despair." In that moment, she charged the wall, instincts guiding her. She pressed her fingertips into the cold bricks, feeling the stories trapped within the surface. With a primal scream, she began to push against the shadows with her own memories of light, of joy, forcing them to confront the warmth she held inside. Screams erupted behind her. Wails of torment spun into a cacophony of despair. Shadows shifted, recoiling as if burned by her resolve. With a flash of brilliance, the wall cracked like glass beneath her touch. Light beckoned from the fissures, desperate and alive. It was hope unfolding, and it pushed back against the dark like a wall of flames. "Get out! Get out!" someone echoed in the distance. But this time Lisa recognized the voice, the sheriff, still searching for her. Will she escape, or will the shadows drag her back into the nightmare? The light brightened, an escape, but how much of herself had she lost in the process? As the darkness convulsed, threatening to swallow her whole, the shadows screeched in rage. "You cannot escape us," they hissed, determination brewing within their ranks. Breathless, Lisa turned to face the light, ready to spring through. But a glint caught her eye. The dark figure stood again, a twisted grin now stretching wider. "Every choice you make has consequences." A new path opened before her. But at what cost? In that moment of truth, she could only wonder. What awaited her on the other side? The answer lingered like bitter smoke, curling around the edges of her mind. Light fractured through the wall like jagged shards of glass, casting eerie patterns on the cold cement floor. Lisa felt the warmth pulsing from those crevices, a siren-esque call promising safety. But the shadows writhed hungrily at her back, their whispers clawing at her sanity, their promises slippery as oil. With a single breath, she hurled herself toward the light. As she dove through the crack, the tumult of dark energy crashed against her, latching onto her limbs as if refusing to release their grip. The moment she passed through, pain shot through her body, sharp and electric, as if 1,000 needles were piercing her skin. For a fleeting second, she thought she might be torn in two. With a gasp, she tumbled onto the ground, rolling uncontrollably until she came to a halt. The light grew dim behind her, the shadows shrieking in outrage, but she forced herself to rise. Cold sweat dripped down her back as she scrambled to her feet, shaking off fear, confusion, and the remnants of desolation that trailed her like a dark cloak. She was outside. The world was bathed in harsh, glaring light, a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness she had just escaped. Yet, that safety felt disrupted, infected. The air was thick with a stench, a mix of burnt rubber and decay, and she could hear faint echoes of cries that made her stomach churn. "Lisa!" The voice resonated, distant yet desperate. It was the sheriff, and he sounded frantic. "Sheriff!" she yelled, stumbling forward. Every step felt heavy, as if the influence of the shadow realm still clawed at her, dragging her back. Her lungs filled with the dry air of the Nevada desert, yet it tasted of impending doom. Ahead, the sheriff broke through a haze of dust, a relief mixed with urgency flooding his features. "Thank God you're okay. What happened down there?" His grip tightened around her shoulders, but Lisa flinched at the contact as shudders danced through her nerves. "I don't know. They wanted something from me," she stammered, choking on the memories. "They meant to consume me." Her breath quickened, and as she spoke, shadows flickered at the corners of her vision, whispering her name, attempting to lure her back into the darkness. The sheriff's expression darkened, realizing the depth of her ordeal. "We need to get out of here. That place is cursed," he growled, glancing over his shoulder, as if sensing the shadows had followed her into the light. "But we can't leave until we understand what we're dealing with." With urgency hammering at her heart, Lisa felt a prickle of dread churn in her belly. "You don't know what they are, what they want." As she spoke, she felt an unsettling sensation wash over her, an ancient weight of despair that lingered just beneath her surface. A gift from the shadows that had tried to steal her away. "Whatever it is, we can't let it linger," the sheriff insisted, but his voice began to fade, scattered by the thickness of her thoughts. For a moment, she stood paralyzed, caught between the urge to flee and a sense of duty to confront the darkness that had tried to claim her. Each passing second felt like a countdown, like a clock ticking closer to her next choice: stay or leave, fight or run. Focusing her mind, she recalled the shattered wall, the warmth of hope that had flickered within her. "No more," she whispered, holding onto that light even as it dimmed. "I can't just let it go." The ground trembled, vibrations layering beneath her feet, growing stronger. The shadows reformed around them, coiling through the sand, creating tendrils of darkness that reached for them like grasping fingers. "Lisa, move!" The urgency in the sheriff's voice snapped her back. But with a shiver, she felt that the darkness had marked her. It would not release its hold so easily. A dark whisper caressed her ear, chilling her to the bone. "You may run, but the shadows will always find you." As the wind howled around her, the sheriff pulled her close. "What do we do? They're closing in." In that moment of terror, Lisa's heart raced, and from deep within, she felt something stir, a dark determination she never wanted to claim. What power did she possess? The shadows breathed, and Lisa realized she was no longer just escaping. She was preparing for a fight. But what would that fight reveal? Would she become a beacon of hope, or a vessel for darkness? Steeling herself, she whispered, "I will not be consumed." And as the shadows surged forward, a new question burned in her mind. What if she could turn the tide? The wind roared as shadows danced like phantoms around them, tendrils of darkness weaving in and out amidst the swirling dust. Lisa could feel them pressing in, hungry and relentless. Heart hammering, she clenched her fists, searching for something within her, a power to fight back. "Stay close," the sheriff shouted, pulling her toward an old rusted vehicle half buried in sand. Its peeling paint seemed to absorb the sunlight, making it look alive, sinister. They ducked behind it, peering from their hiding spot as the shadows writhed, coiling like snakes in search of prey. "What do they want?" she gasped, her voice barely a whisper against the looming terror. Panic clawed at her throat, and she could almost taste the metallic fear coating her tongue. "I don't know," the sheriff replied, his brow furrowed, "but we have to figure it out fast. They're feeding off your fear, Lisa. That's why they're all around us now." He looked at her, and she could see the flicker of apprehension in his eyes, a reflection of her own. The shadows seemed to pulse in response, a dark heartbeat echoing in the stillness between them. Every whispering sound felt like a direct threat. "Hungry," they hissed, the chorus rising in intensity. "Get back." she shouted suddenly, her voice breaking the spell. Shadows lunged through the gaps of the old car, racing toward her like ravenous wolves. In that moment, something unfurled within her, igniting a flame of fury. "No, I refuse to let you take me again," she roared, extending her hands toward the darkness. To her amazement, a searing light erupted from her palms, illuminating the air around them in a blinding gold. It pushed back the shadows, forcing them to retreat, their howls morphing into a symphony of anguish. The sheriff stumbled backward, eyes wide. How are you doing that?" he gasped. "I don't know," she admitted, her breath coming in heaving bursts. "But I think I can control it." The shadows hissed, forming a thick wall of swirling darkness right in front of her. A palpable tension crackled in the air, and she could sense their frustration. They were trying to reclaim her, trying to snuff out the light she had unwittingly summoned. "Fight, Lisa! Push harder!" urged the sheriff, mirroring her determination. Channeling her fear into a focused will, she pressed forward. The shadows writhed, striking against her light, but it held firm, flickering defiantly in the face of despair. "You will not have me," she yelled. The shadows recoiled again, revealing flashes of grotesque faces trapped within them, mouths frozen in silent screams. The sight sent a shiver down Lisa's spine. Her adrenaline surged. What if they aren't just shadows? What if they're trapped souls? The thought hit her like a freight train, a nagging intuition clawing at her memory. "Lisa, look," the sheriff warned, pointing frantically. In a chilling moment of serendipity, she noticed something shimmering amidst the darkness, a broken shard from the wall that had split her from their grasp. It glinted as if calling to her, a bridge to a method to end this. "Together," she yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. They bolted toward it. The shadows lunged again, trying to reclaim her. As she grasped the shard, a vision flooded her mind, dark figures, their hollow eyes pleading, each a victim of the darkness. The realization struck her hard. "They were once like me, they need my help." "Lisa!" the sheriff shouted, desperation creeping into his voice as the shadows surged angrily. The eerie murmurs crescendoed into a cacophony that drowned out logic, filling their minds with dread. But in that second of clarity, she saw at the brightness within the darkness an invitation to merge her light with the trapped souls. "If I can bring them out," she breathed. With her heart a drumbeat of hope and fear, she raised the shard high, a beacon against the encroaching shadows. "I'll save you," she cried, swinging the shard down, the light erupting once more. But the shadows had their own plans, and as the light blazed brighter, a dark laugh echoed through the air. "You think you have power?" In that moment, something deep and sinister stirred, and Lisa realized with mounting horror, she might have just unleashed something far worse. The ground shook violently as a new evil hovered on the brink, and Lisa's thoughts spiraled. What have I done? As the shadows gathered, coalescing into a figure larger than life, she steeled herself for what could be the ultimate confrontation. Would she stand tall against this malevolent force, or would she fall victim to the very darkness she sought to save? "Brace yourself," she whispered to the sheriff, as the figure loomed closer. A whisper escaping its lips, "The games have just begun." The shadows twisted and turned, forming a monstrous figure that loomed with horrifying majesty. It was not like the others. This one had shape, depth, and malevolence, glimmering with dark energy that pulsated like a heart in the night. Its form was cloaked in ragged, flowing tendrils that seemed to absorb the surrounding light, creating a physical void that threatened to snuff out Lisa's newfound illumination. "Do you think your little light can protect you?" The voice boomed, resonating in the very marrow of her bones. It felt like 1,000 whispers, merging into a thunderous demand. A dark thrumming in the air, a chill gripped Lisa's heart. She tightened her hold on the shard. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But the sheriff stood beside her, determination etching lines across his weathered face. "Don't back down, Lisa," he urged. "It's feeding on your fear. You have to show it your strength." The figure lunged, a heavy shadow barreling toward them. Instinct kicked in, and with a desperate yell, Lisa swung the shard again, unleashing another wave of light. It collided with the creature, causing a stunning flash that lit up the landscape momentarily. "Foolish girl," it shrieked, recoiling slightly but not faltering. "You can't banish me. I am the hunger in every soul, the terror of the forgotten." With every echo of its dark laughter, the shields of Lisa's courage cracked. Shadows darted around her, growing bolder, emboldened by her momentary hesitation. They encircled her like a tightening noose. "Focus on the light," the sheriff shouted, his own voice almost lost in the surrounding chaos. In that moment, images bombarded Lisa's mind, faces of despair, cries for help, and her own childhood fears unleashed from the prison of her memory. She was not just fighting for herself. She was fighting for each soul she saw, each soul that had become a part of this dark tapestry woven by the entity. "Get out of my head," she screamed, forcing the memories back with grit. Just when she thought she might crumble under the weight, she felt a surge of warmth, a flicker of hope igniting inside her. With renewed ferocity, she thrust the shard toward the shadow. "You will not take me, and you will not take them." A blinding light erupted, sweeping over the twisted figure and exploding in all directions. The howl of pure rage throbbed with an almost physical force, shaking ground beneath them. Dust flew, choking the air and swirling in the bright storm. In the chaotic rush, Lisa caught a fleeting glimpse of the many souls within the shadows, some reaching toward her, their relief palpable as the light engulfed them. They wanted release. "Lisa," the sheriff's voice cut through the chaos, urging her still. "They're in there, but you must harness your power. Channel it." The swirling shadows flickered, revealing glimpses of their true forms, lost souls with hollow, desperate eyes trying to escape their eternal prison. But the darkness shifted, becoming more erratic, more aggressive, attempting to drown out her light with sheer terror. Suddenly, a piercing scream erupted from the entity, a sound like 1,000 tortured souls echoing through the caverns of despair. "Feel the pain. You think you're free, but you're not. I will consume you all." Lisa's resolve wavered, but she couldn't afford the luxury of doubt. With a final breath, she gathered every ounce of strength, channeling it through the shard, focusing on the piercing light of hope now dazzling in front of her. It shone bright, a beacon against the raging storm. "Together," she roared, lunging forward, light radiating like a tidal wave crashing against the darkness. It surged toward the shadows, threatening to destroy the very essence of the creature. But just as it seemed victory was at hand, the earth shuddered violently, and Lisa stumbled. Her grip on the shard faltered, the light flickering. "What's happening?" the sheriff shouted, panic mounting in his eyes as the very fabric of reality twisted around them. "I don't know," she cried, her heart racing. Beneath their feet, the ground cracked open, an eerie glow emanating from the fissure. "Lisa," the sheriff gasped. The shadows encroached, greedy and hungry. And then Lisa remembered every soul that had been trapped needed her, needed the light she could bring. "Never give up," she shouted, raising the shard one last time. But before she could release the light, the darkness enveloped her completely. A voice like ice whispered directly into her mind. "You will face your greatest fears, and they will be your end." The abyss yawned before her, pulling her deeper as her thoughts raced. Each soul she had hoped to save now seemed lost once more, banished to the void. Would she succumb to her own shadows, or find a way out of this suffocating nightmare? The world around her dimmed as the final barrier crumbled. The last remnants of light flickered, and in that abyss, all hope hung by a single thread. "Lisa," the sheriff shouted desperately, reaching for her hand. But was it too late? As darkness surged around her, a new fear took root. Something primal awakened within her, shifting the edges of her reality. And then, everything went black. What would emerge from the void? Who would save them now? The darkness enveloped Lisa fully, a suffocating void where hope felt like a distant memory. She could hear the echoes of despair swirling around her, thousands of cries melding into an insatiable howl. "I will consume you," the voice taunted, sinister and all-consuming, digging into her thoughts, attempting to weaken her resolve. But amid the chaos, a flicker of light ignited within her, an ember growing stronger with unwavering determination. "I am not afraid," she whispered, her voice barely cutting through the tempest. Was she truly speaking, or was it the shadows sharing their silent laughter? Memories crashed against her. Ellie and Jake filled her mind, their smiles, laughter, and innocence rekindling the light within her heart. No, she wouldn't let them be overshadowed by this menace. This prison thrived on dread. She could feel it deep within her bones. Trembling, Lisa focused on her memories, the warmth of her children, the gentle hugs, and their cries of joy. Each moment quickly transformed into a shield, illuminating the darkness like a beacon. "I will free you," she roared, desperation and hope merging into a powerful resolve. The shadows shuddered, recoiling momentarily, as if raw light had scorched their essence. Strengthened by the lost cries of those trapped long before her, Lisa closed her eyes and concentrated. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as the shard glowed brighter with her will, casting a warm hue across the darkness. "Together," she shouted, feeling the shadows waver, caught between her burgeoning light and the oppressive force they had unleashed. It was now or never. With a determined thrust of her arm, she swung the shard down, sending beams of light spiraling outwards, cutting through the deep veil of shadows and locking onto the thrumming energy of the creature before her. The shrieks transformed into raw rage, and Lisa could feel the very fabric of the air warp around them. "No, you cannot." The creature's voice splintered into fragments, fragmented whispers intertwining into deafening chaos. But Lisa was unstoppable. Suddenly, a vision overwhelmed her. She stood at the intersection of light and dark, stripped of all her fears, her vulnerabilities unveiled. It was a game of power, and she had all the tools to win. "You are nothing without the fear of others," she exclaimed fiercely. Shadows pulsated angrily, shadows of lost souls now flickering with rising courage. With another surge of will, she directed her focus toward them. They needed her strength, and in that moment, she became a vessel of light, a connection between the lost and the living. The shadows shifted, hesitating now, as if realizing their hold was weakening. "Feel our pain," called forth the voices of the trapped souls, rising like a chorus from the depths. "Set us free." The air crackled, the energy around her blossoming as harmony began to ensue, intertwining her light with theirs. "We will overcome this," Lisa declared with fervor, pushing back against the darkness. The shadows slowed, their terrifying forms shifting as if they were unsure of their power against a united front. The creature wailed, twisting in terror, and for the first time, it began to fracture. "No!" it screamed, desperation swelling within its chaotic form. "You cannot escape. I will take you all." Just then, Lisa felt the sheriff beside her once more, linking his strength to hers. "That spirit feeds on your fear," he shouted, bolstering her resolve. "You are powerful enough to break this curse. Free them." And as if on cue, the melded light surged, illuminating every dark corner around them. Both Lisa and the sheriff stood as towers of brightness against the obscurity, forcing the shadows to recoil, their mere presence creating a palpable barrier. "You can't hold me. You can't hold them," she cried out, her voice echoing with newfound certainty, resonating against the void. Then there came a final, blinding flash, a tidal wave of shimmering light propelled from the shard, erupting like the sun breaking through a storm. Everything felt suspended, frozen in time, and the shadows howled, incessantly consumed by their fury. In that instant, every soul trapped within the abyss merged with her light, breaking free from their chains, their anguish revealing itself as relief. The darkness writhed, howling against the surging energy, and finally, with an earth-shattering roar, it imploded into itself, dissipating into nothing but swirling dust. When the brightness dimmed, and silence enveloped the landscape, Lisa opened her eyes. Trembling with disbelief, all around her stood the lost souls, freed at last, their faces beaming with gratitude. And standing beside her was the sheriff, his solemn gaze reflecting relief. "We did it," he breathed, their shared triumph hanging in the air like an ancient spell broken. "Are they really free?" she murmured, fear clawing at her throat, unsure if they had truly escaped the suffocating darkness. They are. His smile flickered, one of hope finally glimmering through the dusty haze of despair. As the last shadows receded, the prison's sinister grip was lifted, leaving only the remnants of what had once been a hollow shell of horror now basking in the glow of redemption. The sun began to rise over the horizon, illuminating the Nevada desert in swathes of gold, and Lisa felt a wave of warmth wash over her, a sunbeam that kissed away her fears. She turned toward the horizon, a new beginning waiting just outside the walls of that cursed prison. With her children's laughter echoing in her heart, she turned to the sheriff, gratitude swelling within her. "Let South leave this place," she said softly, "and never look back." With renewed purpose, they stepped forward, leaving the night's terrors behind, ready to embrace the warmth of freedom and the promise of brighter days. The prison that had once held so much darkness faded behind them, a mere shadow of the horrors once contained in its walls. They had faced their fears, fought the darkness, and emerged victorious, ready to share their story with the world, a beacon of hope for the lost souls still searching for freedom. Now be sure to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and help others discover this thrilling conclusion. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. We want to hear from you. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand how important it is to support the channel through these actions.